Cool. Thanks for joining. So this session, I was asked to blend two topics: how someone can make a career shift from being a software developer into a security role, which I understand is interesting to the chapter, and also how to start the security journey for your company. So I'll do my best to blend the two. We will start with how I got from software developer to security role and what entry points I've seen for other colleagues. And then I will talk a bit of what I'm doing now in my current role, setting up secure development lifecycle. And in the end, we will bring it together. So like I said, we will do Q&A in the end. Hopefully I will leave enough time. But if you have a question in the middle, feel free to ask it. I hope we have enough time for all the questions. So with that, I'll start with how I got to where I am. I started as a software developer back then with dinosaurs. And when you look at your own journey, you will see as you become a senior engineer, principal, or whatever is the job titles, you become more and more involved in the process. You are asked to improve the processes in the team, or maybe to introduce some changes and all that. So you, even if you are still individual contributor, you still will be aware of what's going on in the development process around you. And this is how I became involved in agile transformation. And it started taking more and more of my time, up to a point where I took a formal certification to be a Scrum Master. But also in parallel, another interesting thing happened in the company I was working for. We also went on a secure development transformation. And by that time, I was a technical lead involved with multiple teams. So this took a huge chunk of my time, this secure development transformation. And it was very interesting. I really enjoyed it. I thought, actually, I want to do it full time. And it took a while to achieve it. And these days, I think recruiters are more open to this kind of jump from secure development to from development role to security role. But back then it took me a while to even get my CV noticed. And what helped was to put a certificate on CV. So I think CISSP is what I did. And it didn't change anything, but at least my CV was bypassing the first barrier from recruiter to actual hiring manager who understands what they need. And I know certificates have not a great reputation in security industry, and people laugh and they go, this is silly. And some of them are genuinely silly, some do have some knowledge. But for me, what it did, I'm pretty sure it helped my CV stop going to the paper basket and get into whoever was needing to read it. Anyway, so 2014 was my first, I guess, formal security job as a security consultant. So I learned pen testing, which was very useful to see the other side from building apps to breaking apps. But most of my consultancy was because of my background with clients who wanted to improve the life cycles, the architectures. I've done lots and lots of threat modeling for, I guess, 8 years in total. And in 2011, I moved back to an in-house full-time role application security lead, which is where I am for almost a year now. And I will talk about how we are working on building our secure development lifecycle. But this is my career journey, and I've seen other people on a similar journey. I also seen people coming to security from different ways, from just an interest as a hobby, and then they become pen tester. From network engineering, people come to security. Variety of routes, and I think these days the industry is much more open to this opportunity from people coming from variety of backgrounds. So we will come back to this topic of career journey, hopefully at the end of the talk. And now I want to talk a bit about how to build the secure development around you. So my first question is, what kind of company we are talking about? So our industry used to have Big Five, FANG, and now it's a different acronym because Facebook is Meta and Google is Alphabet and Netflix is down and Microsoft is back up or whatever. So it's a different acronym, but it doesn't matter. What matters is most security engineers don't work for one of these big fives. Typically, when you join a company in your security role, the security team will be in single digits, or maybe you will be a higher number one. So big five are big, but most security engineers don't work for them. They work for a different type of company. And there is not a lot of advice out there that targets this space, in my opinion. Now, there is a lot of security advice available online. And most of it targets big five, and this is how it looks like. I hope the image with the joke is readable, because actually I think it's a good joke. I like it. So this advice, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it won't be applicable. It will be like, how do I scale my security problem to 500 teams and 50,000 applications? And not everyone works in a space like that. So I, for example, joined as security hire number 3 in total, but the first AppSec hire. So say you've joined a company in a similar role because of your software development background, you've got a role in application security, or maybe it's called secure development, or maybe it's called DevSecOps. And maybe your task is defined as introducing security culture. There are lots of different labels that can be put on this kind of role. But what do you actually do? And this is where maybe a bit of bad news. But I think an honest opinion is, by the time the first hire happened, the company already shaped 90% of what the security culture will look like. They didn't put any conscious thought into it, but their engineering culture defines the future security culture. So this blog is very good about how to start security in a startup. And this is a quote I like massively because it really reflects my experience. An engineering team that values and cares for security will achieve far better outcomes than an engineering team that doesn't care. And throwing tools at them will not change it, and hiring for security will not change it. So what does it mean is building a culture of security starts before your first security hire. And it's the same for any horizontal culture, like performance, for example. When you think about performance of software, you cannot improve it by hiring a performance engineer. It will depend on early architecture and various choices and whether the team even cares about performance. So it's the same with quality, with reliability, any other horizontal property. So by the time you join a company, the security culture is already established. So the trajectory is already there, even if no role with security in the title existed before you came there. So what does it mean? How can you influence your future work experience? If you're making transition from software development to security, how do you know you land in a role that you will enjoy? Because it's already established, you need to ask questions about engineering culture, and the answers you will get in your interviewing process will be very informative. So when I was interviewing for my current job, the process went two very different ways, two very easy to distinguish clusters. And sometimes the interview would go something like that. We have developers. It's unavoidable. We must have software development, and we keep these dangerous beasts in a cage over there. See the cage? Please tell us how in your career, what types of cages you worked with, what locks do you know about, how you will ensure that they stay there and don't do damage to the rest of our company. And this is kind of a direction that tells you a lot about how company views engineers and what sort of culture, and they expect security to be all about gates and stopping people from doing things. And a completely different cluster of interviews went, we have developers, because this is what our company is about, building software. This is how we make our money. And they are really creative people, and we want you to help them to fulfill this creativity, but in safe ways. So if one place more, the nearest metaphor is help us keep them in the cage because they're dangerous beasts. The other metaphor is more like the children in a playground, help us build a safer playground. And it's very easy to spot, and you can understand a lot about this pre-existing security culture in an interview process. So when I joined my current company, it had company values, and I've built principles of how security interacts with the rest of engineering based on these values. Should you grab these principles? No, I think they're great, but they're great for us. They're aligned to our company. You should build your own. I want to expand on them because I think they are a good example of how security culture needs to be aligned to an overall engineering culture. Now, the syntax of it is Cypher. So we are a graph database company, and we use a language that is not SQL, because it's not a SQL database, it's a Cypher. It's a language for interacting with graph databases, and hopefully it's self-explanatory. There are nodes and relationships between nodes. So had to define principles of how security interacts with engineering team. And the first one is security team trusts that engineering teams want to do the right thing. So I see our role to help engineering to do the right thing. And also, we know that engineering teams are closer to the business context, and they can make better trade-off decisions between security and other considerations of user success. They work day-to-day either directly with users or with people who interact with the users. They work day-to-day with product management much more than we do. So they can make these trade-offs better. What we can do is give them information that allows them to do better trade-offs. So we promise to give information and advice for better and more informed trade-off decisions. And another thing is, practically speaking, we promise if we want them to do something, we will absorb the pain of introducing a new tool or a new practice. We will make it easy before saying you must do that. So these are the principles on which our security team interacts with engineering. Structurally, our security team is part of engineering. It doesn't have to be like that. I know companies where security team sits outside of engineering, but if you are in application security, you have to interact with engineering a lot. And if you come from software development background, it's easier actually. It's great to have this kind of background. As I said, cannot have security culture that is separate from overall engineering culture. So for us, our values are connected to our overall company values. So when I built these principles, it reflected company values, but also a couple of other sorts of inspiration. Can I really annotate? What happens when I... Yeah. Okay, so this is a really, really entertaining talk. Like Larry is a great speaker. Spend 40 minutes watching this video. You will enjoy it. And I've borrowed a lot of inspiration from there. And another source of inspiration, GitLab, they have a very open security playbook. It used to be even more insanely open. Everything was online, but I think they had a couple of cases where a researcher read about issues they found and used it to find other issues that they declared. They didn't declare yet, so they closed it down a bit. But still a lot of really, really good information there that you can use to build your own SDLC application security program, but adapt it to what you already have. In terms of structure, oh no, how do I get annotations away? Okay, in terms of structure, there is a really, really good concept of team topologies. And it talks about 4 fundamental types of the team. It's a really good book on the topic, and there are lots of presentations. But I recommend this one because Mario adapted the concept for security. And the shortcut is stream-aligned teams are engineering teams who bring value to the company. They build software, company sells software or subscription or services or whatever, but this is what brings money. The stream-aligned teams bring money. Security is an enabling team, and we work with multiple development teams in a larger company, or maybe if you join the startup, there will be only one team. But the most important thing to remember from this is you cannot say no to engineering flow activities. You don't want to be a team that stops company from making money. So how to build the topology of security team relating to engineering teams, every company will be different, but one thing to remember, we are always an enabling team and we help streamline teams to get faster business flow. So this is how to pick the right place and how to start shaping the overall role of security team. And if that is your role, then I hope you take some actionable ideas from this talk. Let's get to them. The high-level list of what you will need to do when you start, in my opinion, you will start with building some kind of secure development standard, introduce a couple of mandatory activities, and most likely you will need security champions, which I will explain. So this is quite universal. I hope it will suit one way or another most companies who start on secure development journey. But remember, always remember, adapt to your own reality. Because there are books out there, but it doesn't mean you can throw a book at everybody's desk and suddenly you have secure development. You always need to adapt and to grow it and adjust it. To put it on a sort of timeline, on a roadmap, you will probably start with a standard, pick the first activity, start onboarding people to this activity, take lessons learned, like, you know, this cycle, plan, act, whatever, and then repeat to infinity, because security is not a place where we can say, okay, now we are secure, we can stop here. It's a forever journey. The joy. Any questions so far? I see nothing in the chat, so I will go on with it. So DevSecOps, it's a very popular buzzword. It will probably stay popular for another 5 years or so. And I'm sure you came across it and you're asking, where's my infinity loop? So first of all, here is the security journey blog. Is really good blog from an industry colleague, and he talks about 12 security culture fails, and one of the fails, he says, infinity loop. Drop it, don't use it. I think maybe it's too far. Maybe we can do a better infinity loop. So this one I saw on Deloitte blog, and it really resonated with how I see this whole security culture business, because it's much more heavy on the left part of the loop before you even started building software. This is where security starts, right? Before you even wrote software, you need to think how our customers and end users look like, what they will want to do, what if one of them is malicious, what they will want to do if they are malicious, what are our regulatory obligations, what we want to achieve for privacy in our software, all sorts of questions that you need to start thinking about in security mindframe before you even started to build your software. And yes, it's still a loop that goes all the way to ops. You still need to operate your software in a secure way and monitor it for threats and protect it from threats. So it's all important, but when we talk about security culture, we should start pay attention much earlier than the operation stage. So I said probably the first thing you will be asked to deliver is S-SDLC standard. And why? Because business will most likely ask you for it. If you are in any kind of business to business software, you probably came across security questionnaires. Anyone who will consider buying your software will ask you all sorts of questions about your security, and one of them will be, how do you do secure development? So most likely it will be one of your first tasks to build this kind of standard. What its structure needs to be, you want to align it to your actual development process, and the depth of it, make it easy to read. Like developers will not read 100 pages volume. Make it to the point. And some people actually do like to read about security, so give them in-depth links, but keep mandatory bits short. So we have this standard, and there are lots of things you can do for security. Where to go first? And there is a variety of frameworks with crazy amount of choices. So we have BSIM, OpenSUM, DSOM, lots of activities, lots of maturity levels. Where do you start? I actually really like this playbook. So this screenshot comes from this playbook. It has about 50 controls. They're sort of aligned to DSOM levels. It makes a lot of sense. It's sensibly grouped. But none of these frameworks is bad. Pick the one that suits you, apply analysis from what you learned about your current situation, and pick a sensible roadmap, because you will have to adapt it no matter what. So you will never design a perfect roadmap for three years forward, so don't even waste time trying. Start somewhere, learn, adapt. As I said, the journey is infinite. And when you pick this first activity, when you say to all the teams, you must do this, make tracking the onboarding to this activity and information radiator, put it somewhere that everyone can see which teams are on board, which are not. It also creates sort of peer pressure or viral marketing, or no matter how you want to look at it. Like all of my peers are doing it, why my team is not doing it? For us, the first activity we chose was security prompt, and it's pretty simple. We want, for each story or backlog item or whatever it is in your environment, we want developers ask these questions. How can a malicious user intentionally abuse this functionality, and how we can prevent it? So you can read more in depth about this activity in this blog. So all the teams are supposed to follow this. And we've done a little bit of automation behind these workflows. Let me show you quickly. So these workflows are specific to us. You need to adapt to your reality. But for example, we start with, how can a user abuse this? We think they can do something, let's capture this. Or we think this feature has no security implications whatsoever. Let's just capture this fact as well. So if we think a feature has no security impact, let's record it. And sometimes a perfectly legitimate flaw from this question is, I have no idea, can security team help me? And then you call security team for help, and we come and do some kind of threat modeling with your team maybe. And the same for second question, how we can prevent it. Either we can implement some kind of security controls, or we can make design resilient to these threats, and we probably want tests to check it's indeed resilient. And again, it's always an option to call security team for help. I guess I skip it, it's boring. We automated it in Trello a bit. Trello has backend automation. It's very horrible. Okay, hopefully this is less boring. I've gathered statistics on this security prompt for a while, and the very encouraging outcome was teams very quickly learned to get it right. So say I've started end of February, and outcomes of reviews of stories with teams had no security impact, 91% got it right. When I checked, there was indeed no security impact. So the couple where I was a bit suspicious, I had to follow up and have conversation with the team. And an even smaller percentage, okay, there was a mistake. There was a security impact the team didn't identify, and my review identified it. And then end of March, again, 91+% got it right. And what looked suspicious turned out to be perfectly okay. And last time I actually had to do follow-up was end of April. So teams consistently get it right. What does it mean? I can move from checking every card to sampling. What looks interesting from security point of view, I will check. Otherwise, I just trust the team's judgment that there is no security impact to this feature. And am I preaching bad practice? Because it's a common wisdom to say centralized security reviews do not work. And I agree with it. It will not scale and it's not sustainable forever. But we are in a learning mode. When we learn what actually teams are struggling with, we can build secure patterns. But it would be premature to start building patterns before understanding repeatable problems. And also, I'm not inserting myself as a gate. If teams said no security impact, they don't need to wait for my stamp of approval to keep moving. They are informing me, but they are not waiting for any confirmation. So hopefully I'm not preaching a bad practice, because I understand the limitations of it, and it's limited in time and scope. Another thing that it gained our team in terms of security culture, it made us a well-connected team. So to go back who we are a graph database company, and our motto is help the world make sense of data, and I couldn't resist trying to make sense of Trello data. So I grabbed Trello cards from multiple engineering boards to understand how they are connected across teams. And security is a pretty well-connected team. Because of this security prompt, we are involved with every engineering team. So that was useful in all sorts of things. So we said, build a standard, pick a first activity. Here's an example of first activity. And then track onboarding. Track onboarding is pretty simple. You have a list of teams. You have a list of security activities that your standard prescribes, and you track over time who is doing what. Now, in a very simple way, it will be yes and no answer. If you watch this video that I've mentioned before, he talks about a deeper way of tracking onboarding. Instead of yes, no, there are different sort of cognitive levels of doing security activity. Have a look. It's very interesting. If it suits your understanding of reality around you, do it that way. If not, start with binary yes or no. I said you will probably need security champions, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because it's a topic all by itself, but that's the way to scale your security team. So for us, we run it as a guild. security champion is a developer with an interest in security, and they help to amplify security message at the team level. For you, it may work to run it as a guild, or you may need to adapt it. There are lots of guidance and playbook how to set up security champions. So we run it as a guild. This is the definition of the role of the guild member, and it works pretty well for us so far. So back to my high-level list. I hope it's universal, but you will need to adapt it. Don't overwhelm teams with rate of change. Do new activities at a manageable rate. And some kind of useful resources for this. So my number one resource is TLDR. Clean does amazing work monitoring all the AppSec conferences and blogs and all that, and it's a super useful weekly digest. Really, most things that I've learned about AppSec come from there. Security Champions Playbook. If you need to set up Security Champions program, it's a very good place to start. DevSecOps, as I said, there is a lot of reading there. I like this one, DevSecOps series. CloudSecDocs is a repository of documentation on multiple security topics, and it's not a graveyard of random documentation. It's curated and structured really well, so you can pick a tag that interests you, and there is really quality resources there. Team topologies for security, I've mentioned. It's a really good talk that explains principles, why security team is an enabling team. And Threat Modeling Manifesto, I just have to mention because I was working on it, and I think it follows this principle of aligning security activity to what developers are already doing, to what engineering culture and engineering processes look like. And this is the best way, again, in my opinion, to introduce security activities that will stick, not just you announce it and it dies a couple of months later. It needs to be aligned with what engineers are doing. So these are useful resources on starting SDLC. And back to the career path. When you come from coding background, you already have tons of advantages. Modern security programs have a lot of automation and bringing tools together. So by knowing coding, you're already at an advantage. And some tools say you don't need coding via a low code. You will still be better at doing even the low code integrations. And in terms of soft skills, because you have understanding of how development process works, you understand what developers use in terms of tooling, you understand the difficulties, you will be a much better security engineer than someone who doesn't have this background. So this is an interactive tool, career pathways tool. It's really well designed. It aligns different career paths in security with skills that you need. You can spend hours of fun playing with it. Because I'm talking about application security, there are other interesting roles in security where a background in software development could be beneficial. So that's only one path. I'm sure there are other paths into an interesting role in security. So that's the end of it, and we have 15 minutes for questions, which is exactly where I wanted to land. So any questions?
Thank you very much, Irene. I have a question. So when you were designing the security champion program, have you faced any issues that like not a lot of developers want to be security champions because they are afraid of taking the responsibility for the security. Like, and if you face such problem, like how is it possible to overcome this?
So that's a good question. So it took a while to get in a state where every team has a champion. We've started with running a session about it at an internal conference that we have in engineering. So we run a session about security champions, what it is, what do they need to do. And we've bought a core of champions from this session. And after that, it was promoting the concept. So we set up field meetings monthly and async communications through Slack and all that. And it's an open channel, so anyone can have a look and see what they're talking about, what they're doing, what it will mean for me if I join. And from talking to other teams, so the way we are structured, the teams are pretty interconnected. So from talking to other teams, you get this, who is your security champion? Oh, we don't have anyone. Should our team also have a security champion? And the last resort, the safety net I had in my mind was, if nothing comes, I will go and talk to engineering manager and say, help me find security champion for this team. And it was genuinely last resort, I think, out of 20 teams, maybe one or two, we found a champion that way. So promoting the concept, and as a last resort, you will need to come through engineering management route. That was our way to get coverage in each team.
Thank you.
One thing I didn't mention, communication. There is no such thing as too much communication when you're in security and you're talking to development. I always keep to overcorrect myself because I tend to think, you're crazy, you don't need to talk about it week after week after week. People read the blog or announcement or whatever. And no, I'm not crazy. People didn't read the blog. People didn't read the announcement. If you talk about it again, someone new will hear and something good will happen. So you can't over communicate. Keep mentioning things through different channels. No one will think you're crazy.
Hi, Irene. I also have a question. I might miss it, but you said that you have you use security champions. So I just asked, like, how is your way of delivering? I guess you say that you don't enforce people on things. So if you want to make sure, let's say a base image is up to date, do you use enforcement, or do you alert, or do you then alert to the security champion of the team, or do you have a strategy on that?
Let me give you an example, actually, how we've done it. So when we were introducing our static analysis tool to make it mandatory, so I thought the first step is just scan everything, don't even alert people, build a backlog of issues, fix it. And then the next step, I thought, let's introduce checks in pull request, but in non-breaking checks, because that's what the common wisdom is, right? Don't break the build. Developers don't like it. Start with the non-breaking checks, and after they're used to it and you verified it works, only then turn it into break-in check. And they took this idea to the security champions of the, I think our pilot was to onboard 4 teams. And I spoke with security champions of these teams saying this is the plan. And they said, no, we don't want non-break-in checks. We want checks that actually break the build if they fail, because we have this culture of no one commits on red. And if you introduce non-break-in checks, you will train the developers that sometimes it's okay to commit on a broken check, and we don't want it.
Nice. That's very nice.
Yeah, so I had to change the plan. And this is a great example where you really need to take into account how the engineering culture is set up and how developers want to work. That wasn't the answer that I expected, but we had to adapt our approach.
No, same, but it actually makes sense. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we ran out of time now. And yeah, thank you very much, Irene, for hosting this session. And I will share the recording soon.
Thank you.